In the dusty outskirts of Texas, Cole Maddox built an empire of cattle and gold behind iron gates and a wall of silence. For 20 years, townsfolk whispered that anyone who crossed onto his land never returns. Nobody dared approach the reclusive cowboy until one stormy night when Lila, a desperate young orphan with nowhere else to turn, knocked on his door. What she found wasn't the monster from the rumors, but a man haunted by a tragedy that had locked his heart away from the world. As an uneasy bond forms between the hardened rancher and the brave girl, Cole's buried past begins to surface. When ruthless men arrive with greed in their eyes and guns in their hands, everything will change. But what secret could possibly turn a wealthy man into a hermit feared by an entire town? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Maddox Ranch stretched across 10,000 acres of Texas prairie, a kingdom of grassland and cattle that rolled like an ocean under the relentless sun. From the main road, travelers could see the iron gates that marked its entrance, twin pillars of black metal bearing the Maddox brand, a circled M with a star at its center. Those gates had been closed for 2 decades, locked tight as a coffin, and the man who lived beyond them had become more legend than flesh. Cole Maddox rose each morning at 5, as he had done for 47 years. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when his boots hit the hardwood floor of the bedroom where he'd slept alone since the world ended. He dressed in the same uniform every day, denim jeans worn soft at the knees, a chambray work shirt, and a leather belt with a silver buckle he'd won at a rodeo in his younger days. The face that stared back from the mirror was weathered like the land itself, creased and tanned, with grey threading through dark hair he kept short and practical. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held the same warning. The house around him was a monument to absence. 3 stories of stone and timber, built by his grandfather in 1923. It had once rang with laughter and the sounds of living. Now it held only silence and dust motes that danced in shafts of morning light. Cole moved through rooms that hadn't changed in 20 years, past furniture draped in sheets, past closed doors he never opened, past the silver-framed photograph on his desk that lay face down and had remained that way since the day his world caught fire. His daily routine was as fixed as the stars. Coffee first, black and strong, drunk standing at the kitchen window while he surveyed the land. Then out to the barns where 200 head of cattle waited, their breath steaming in the cool morning air. He employed no ranch hands, managed everything himself with a precision born of necessity and isolation. The work was endless and he preferred it that way. Tired muscles left little room for memory. The town of Redemption Springs lay 12 miles east, a collection of weathered buildings and stubborn people who'd learned to survive in the harsh embrace of West Texas. They remembered Cole Maddox from before, when he'd been a different man entirely. Back then, he'd been the one who organized the 4th of July barbecues, who donated to the school and the church, who could make Catherine laugh so hard she'd cry. Back then, he'd had a son named Michael, who'd inherited his mother's green eyes and his father's steady hands. Back then, Cole Maddox had been whole. The incident, as people called it with hushed voices and averted eyes, happened on a November night when Cole was in Dallas, closing a cattle deal that would secure their future. He'd called Catherine at 8 to say goodnight to Michael, had heard his boy's sleepy voice say, "Love you, Daddy," for what would be the last time. The fire started sometime after midnight, the old wiring in the East Wing. The investigators said the smoke detectors that should have screamed failed to make a sound. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, the flames had consumed everything that mattered. Cole came home to ashes and absent. He buried his wife and son on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath an oak tree where they'd once had picnics. Then he closed the gates and locked the world out. The whispers started almost immediately. Some said grief had driven him mad. Others claimed he'd started the fire himself for insurance money, that he couldn't face what he'd done. A few swore they'd seen him walking the property at night, rifle in hand, ready to shoot anyone who dared trespass. Whether the rumors were true didn't matter. The effect was the same. The Maddox ranch became a place people avoided, and Cole Maddox became a ghost, haunting his own land. Only 3 people were allowed past those iron gates. Sheriff Tom Brennan, who'd been Cole's best friend since high school, and who visited once a month whether Cole wanted him to or not. Rosa Martinez, a 68-year-old woman with iron gray hair and a heart big enough to forgive a man his isolation, who delivered supplies and groceries and pretended not to notice when Cole's voice cracked with disuse. And the third person was Marcus Webb, though calling him welcome would be stretching the truth. Webb was a land developer from Houston, a man who wore expensive suits to cover a cheap soul. He'd been circling the Maddox property for 5 years like a buzzard over roadkill, making offers that insulted more than they tempted. 10 million for the land, 15 million. 20. Cole had stopped reading his letters after the first dozen. What Webb didn't understand, what nobody seemed to grasp, was that the ranch wasn't for sale because it wasn't really a ranch anymore. It was a graveyard, a shrine, a prison that Cole had built for himself out of guilt and grief. Every fence post held a memory. Every acre whispered with ghosts. To sell it would be to admit that Catherine and Michael were truly gone, that life could simply continue as if they'd never existed. Cole would die on this land before he'd let that happen. The house itself was a testament to time frozen. In the living room, Catherine's knitting sat in a basket beside her favorite chair, needles still threaded with blue yarn for a sweater she'd been making for Michael. In the boys' room upstairs, toys remained scattered across the floor exactly as he'd left them the morning of the fire. Cole paid Rosa extra to clean around these things, never to move them. It was madness, he knew, but it was his madness, and he wore it like armor. His wealth had grown despite his isolation, or perhaps because of it. The cattle business ran itself, once you knew what you were doing, and Cole had forgotten more about ranching than most men ever learned. The gold was another matter entirely, a secret he kept even from Sheriff Brennan. His grandfather had found a small deposit on the property back in the 30s, had worked it quietly and carefully, and had passed the knowledge down to Cole's father, who'd done the same. The vein wasn't large enough to attract corporate mining interests, but it was enough to make Cole independently wealthy, enough to make men like Marcus Webb very, very interested. The town knew about the cattle empire. They speculated about how much money Cole really had, given that he never seemed to spend any of it. What they didn't know was that his net worth exceeded 8 figures, that he could have bought the county if he'd wanted to. Money meant nothing when you had no one to spend it on, no future to build, no reason to care about tomorrow. Sheriff Brennan understood this better than most. He'd been there the night Cole came home to find his world in flames. He'd held his friend while Cole screamed, had helped dig the graves, had watched a good man disappear into himself and never fully emerge. Tom made his monthly visits, not because he thought Cole wanted company, but because he refused to let his friend vanish completely. He'd bring news from town, updates on people they'd both known, small attempts to keep Cole tethered to the world of the living. Rosa's approach was different, but no less determined. She'd lost her own husband 10 years back, understood the weight of an empty house. She'd arrive at the gates on the first Monday of each month, honk twice, and wait for Cole to unlock them. She brought groceries, yes, but also tamales wrapped in foil, fresh tortillas, and the kind of maternal scolding that Cole secretly needed. She'd clean what he allowed her to clean, water the plants Catherine had loved, and leave before the silence became too heavy. The rumors about trespassers never returning had a grain of truth wrapped in layers of exaggeration. 3 years back, a group of teenagers had dared each other to sneak onto Maddox land. Cole had found them near the barn drinking beer and laughing. He'd appeared out of the darkness like something from a nightmare, rifle in hand, voice like gravel and granite. He'd escorted them to the gates without a word, but the look in his eyes had been enough to spawn 100 stories. After that, even the bravest souls in redemptions gave the Maddox ranch a wide berth. Marcus Webb, however, was neither brave nor deterred by common sense. He saw the ranch as his ticket to real wealth, imagined luxury housing developments spreading across the grassland, shopping centers where cattle now grazed. He'd made inquiries about Cole's family, had discovered there were no living relatives, no heirs to inherit the empire. Webb had begun making plans, consulting lawyers about eminent domain, researching mineral rights, looking for any angle that might pry the property from Cole's grip. He'd even contacted Catherine's family back east, relatives who'd never approved of her marrying a cowboy, who'd attended the funeral with tight lips and tighter hearts. They'd been sniffing around the edges of the estate, Webb knew, wondering if there might be money in challenging Cole's ownership. It was only a matter of time before the right pressure found the right crack. The photograph on Cole's desk remained face down for a reason. In it, frozen in silver and glass, was everything he'd lost. Catherine, with her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her smile bright and genuine. Michael, 7 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish he'd caught in the creek. And Cole himself, younger, happier, with his arm around his wife and his hand on his son's shoulder. The man in that photograph didn't exist anymore. He died in the same fire that took his family, and what walked around in his body now was something else entirely. Something hard, something that had learned to survive, but had forgotten how to live. The ranch house stood 3 stories tall, its stone walls thick enough to keep out the Texas heat and the winter cold. The first floor held the kitchen, living room, dining room, and Cole's study, where he managed the business of the ranch. The second floor had been the family's living space, bedrooms and bathrooms that now stood empty. The third floor was an attic, converted to storage, full of trunks and boxes, and the accumulated possessions of 3 generations of Maddox men. Cole hadn't been up there since the fire, couldn't bear to sort through the remnants of lives that had ended too soon. In the study, filing cabinets held the records of the ranch's operations, breeding logs, veterinary records, sales receipts, tax documents, organized with military precision. Cole ran the ranch like a business because focusing on numbers kept his mind from wandering into darker territory. He tracked every calf born, every head sold, every dollar earned and spent. The gold operation was documented separately, in a ledger he kept in a safe behind a painting of longhorns his grandfather had commissioned. Only Cole knew the combination. Only Cole needed to. The barns and outbuildings spread across the property in a practical layout designed for efficiency. The main barn held equipment and feed. The calving barn was heated for winter birth. The stables housed the 6 horses Cole kept, including Dante, the black gelding who'd been his companion for 15 years. The animals were the only living things Cole spoke to with any regularity, and they had the good sense not to talk back. At night, after the work was done and the land settled into darkness, Cole would sit on the porch with a glass of whiskey he never finished and watch the stars wheel overhead. This was when the memories came strongest, when Catherine's laugh echoed in the empty rooms behind him, when he could almost hear Michael's footsteps on the stairs. He'd learned to endure these hours, to let the grief wash over him like a familiar tide. Fighting it only made things worse. Acceptance, he'd discovered, wasn't the same as healing, but it was a kind of survival. The cattle knew him by sight and smell, would lift their heads when he walked among them. He checked the fences every week, rode the perimeter of the property every month, maintained the land with the same careful attention he'd learned from his father and grandfather. The Maddox ranch had been in the family for 4 generations, carved out of wilderness by men who understood that the land demanded respect and gave back loyalty to those who treated it right. Cole honored that legacy even though he had no one to pass it to. Sheriff Brennan had stopped asking Cole to come to town, to join him for coffee at the diner, to attend church on Sundays. The refusals had been polite at first, then curt, then simply silence. Tom understood that some wounds went too deep for casual healing. But he worried about his friend, worried that the isolation was becoming permanent, that Cole was turning into the legend the town had created. A man could only live with ghosts for so long before he became one himself. Rosa worried too, but in her own way she'd known Catherine, had watched Michael grow from baby to boy, had seen the love that filled this house before tragedy emptied it. She kept coming back month after month because she remembered who Cole had been, and she held on to hope that somewhere inside the hard shell of the man he'd become, that person still existed. She left small signs of her faith, fresh flowers on the kitchen table, Catherine's favorite cookies wrapped in wax paper, a new book on the shelf she thought he might enjoy. Cole never acknowledged these gestures, but he never threw them away either. The land itself seemed to reflect its owner's isolation. Where once there had been carefully tended gardens and a lawn green from constant watering, now native grasses grew wild and free. The fence lines remained immaculate, the gates secure, but the softness had gone out of the place. It had become functional, practical, as efficient and emotionless as the man who owned it. Visitors to Redemption Springs, those passing through on their way to somewhere else, would sometimes comment on the impressive ranch visible from the highway, would ask about it at the gas station or diner. The locals would exchange glances, and someone would always say the same thing: "That's the Maddox place. Best not to ask." The stories had taken on lives of their own over 20 years. Some claimed Cole had made a deal with the devil to acquire his wealth, that the price was his family's souls. Others whispered he'd gone mad with grief and had killed them himself, that their ghosts haunted the property and would drag trespassers down to join them. Teenagers dared each other to touch the iron gates at midnight, though none ever did. The ranch had become Redemption Springs' own personal haunted house, and Cole its resident monster. The truth, as truth often is, was simpler and sadder than any legend. Cole Maddox was a man who'd lost everything that mattered and had chosen to stop mattering to anyone else. He was a man who woke up every morning and made a conscious decision to keep breathing, to keep working, to keep existing even though the reason for existence had been taken from him. He was a man who'd built walls not just around his property, but around his heart, and had made those walls so high and thick that nothing could get in. Not friendship, not sympathy, not even hope. Marcus Webb understood none of this, because Webb understood nothing about grief or loyalty or the bonds that tied a man to land his family had bled for. Webb saw only numbers and opportunity, saw 10,000 acres that could be subdivided and sold, saw a fortune waiting to be extracted from a stubborn old fool too proud to accept reality. He'd made it his mission to acquire the Maddox Ranch, had spent 5 years studying every legal avenue, every possible pressure point. The property bordered state land on one side, which opened up certain possibilities. The creek that ran through it fed into the county water system, which created others. Webb was patient. He could wait for the right moment, the right leverage. Every man had a breaking point. In town, people had mostly stopped talking about Cole Maddox. He'd become background noise, a fixture like the water tower or the grain elevator. Young people who'd grown up after the fire didn't remember him as anything other than the hermit behind the gates. They'd heard the stories but couldn't picture him as someone's husband, someone's father. He was just the scary man on the hill, the one you didn't bother. But Sheriff Brennan remembered. He remembered Cole teaching Michael to ride, patient and gentle, letting the boy fall and encouraging him to get back up. He remembered Catherine bringing pie to the station on Tom's birthday, every year without fail. He remembered the four of them, Tom and his late wife Sarah, Cole and Catherine, sitting on this very porch on summer evenings, drinking lemonade and solving the problems of the world. Those memories kept him coming back, kept him checking on a friend who didn't want to be checked on, because that's what you did for people you loved. You showed up, even when they didn't want you to. Especially then. The sun was setting over the ranch as it did every evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Catherine had once called God's own canvas. The cattle were settling in for the night, their lowing a familiar soundtrack. The horses stood in their stalls, fed and watered. Everything was in its place, ordered and controlled. The storm rolled in from the north on a Tuesday evening in late September, the kind of weather system that turned the Texas sky black and made the air taste like copper. Cole had seen it building all afternoon, had moved the cattle to the southern pastures where they'd have more shelter, had secured anything that might blow away in the wind. He was no stranger to storms. The land taught you to read the signs, to prepare for what was coming, to respect the power of nature when it decided to draw you who was really in charge. By 7 o'clock the rain was coming down in sheets, driven sideways by wind that howled around the corners of the house like something alive and angry. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, turning the world white and black. White and black. Thunder followed so close it shook the windows in their frames. Cole stood at the kitchen window with his coffee, watching the storm rage, feeling oddly at peace. There was honesty in a storm. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It came at you straight and direct, and when it was done, it left. He was about to turn away when the motion sensor light at the gate flickered on. Cole froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Nobody came to the ranch at night. Nobody came to the ranch at all except on Rosa's scheduled days and Tom's monthly visits. And certainly nobody came during a storm like this. He set down the cup and moved to the window, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. The light showed a small figure at the gate, hunched against the wind, one hand raised to knock on the iron bars. Cole's first instinct was to ignore it. Probably some fool tourist, whose care had broken down, looking for help they weren't going to find here. Let them go back to town. Let them knock on someone else's door. But the figure knocked again, and even through the storm he could hear it. A desperate, determined sound. 3 sharp raps. A pause. Then 3 more. The rhythm of someone who wasn't going to give up. He grabbed his rain slicker from the hook by the door and stepped out onto the porch. The wind tried to rip the door from his hand. Rain soaked through his jeans in seconds. He pulled up his hood and made his way down the gravel drive toward the gates, his boots splashing through puddles that were already ankle-deep. Lighting illuminated the figure again, and Cole's steps faltered. It was a child, a girl, maybe 12 or 13, with dark hair plastered to her head and clothes that hung on her like she'd been swimming in them. When he reached the gates, she looked up at him with eyes that held more exhaustion than fear. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered, but her jaw was set with determination. In her hand she clutched a worn leather satchel, holding it against her chest like it contained everything she owned. It probably did. "Please," she said, and her voice was barely audible over the storm. "I need help. I don't have anywhere else to go." Cole stared at her through the bars. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to go back to his warm, empty house, to let the world's problems remain the world's problems. He'd built these gates to keep people out, to maintain the distance he needed to survive. Opening them now would be a betrayal of everything he'd constructed over 20 years. "Go to town," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "Sheriff's station is on Main Street. They'll help you." "I can't," the girl said. Water ran down her face, mixing with what might have been tears. "I walked 12 miles to get here. I don't have 12 more in me. Please, sir, just for tonight. Just until the storm passes." Lightning struck somewhere close, the thunder immediate and deafening. The girl flinched, but didn't move from the gate. Cole could leave her here, should leave her here. This wasn't his problem. He'd spent 2 decades making sure nothing was his problem. But something in the way she stood there, soaked and shaking but refusing to give up, reminded him of Michael. His son had inherited that stubborn streak, that refusal to quit even when quitting made sense. Cole cursed under his breath, a habit he'd broken after Catherine died and was now apparently resuming. He pulled the keys from his pocket, selected the one for the gate, and unlocked it. The hinges screamed in protest, having gone unused for so long. He pulled the gate open just wide enough for the girl to slip through, then locked it again behind her. "One night," he said, not looking at her. "Storm passes, you leave." "Understood." She nodded, clutching her satchel tighter. "Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much." He turned and walked back toward the house, not checking to see if she followed. His long strides ate up the distance, and he heard her struggling to keep pace behind him, splashing through puddles, breathing hard. When he reached the porch, he held the door open without a word. She hurried inside, dripping onto the hardwood floor. Catherine had been so proud of. In the harsh light of the kitchen, Cole got his first clear look at her. She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 11 or 12, with olive skin and dark eyes that seemed too old for her face. Her clothes were cheap and ill-fitting, jeans that were too short and a jacket that was too thin for the weather. Her sneakers had holes in them. The leather satchel she carried was as worn as she looked. The strap frayed and repaired multiple times, with different colors of thread. "Name," Cole said. "Lila," she answered, still shivering. "Lila Reyes." He pointed to a chair at the kitchen table. "Sit. I'll get towels." When he returned from the linen closet, she'd placed her satchel carefully on the table and was wringing water from her hair. He tossed her a towel and she caught it, immediately burying her face in it. He grabbed another for himself, though he was far less soaked than she was. "There are dry clothes upstairs," he said, then stopped. Michael's clothes, still in the drawers where Catherine had folded them, 20 years ago. His throat tightened. "Never mind, I'll find something." He went to his own room and pulled out an old t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants, both of which would drown her but at least would be dry. When he came back to the kitchen, she was examining the room with quiet intensity, taking in the ancient appliances, the dust on the counters, the calendar on the wall that still showed November 2 decades past. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said, handing her the clothes. "Change. Then we'll figure out food." She disappeared, and Cole stood in the middle of his kitchen feeling like an intruder in his own home. He couldn't remember the last time another person had been here. Rosa didn't count. Rosa came and went like a friendly ghost, cleaning and leaving before conversation became necessary. This was different. This was disruption. This was chaos, entering his carefully controlled world. When Lila emerged, she looked even smaller in his oversized clothes. She'd rolled up the sleeves and pant legs, but they still swallowed her. Her hair was damp, but no longer dripping. She'd washed her face, and without the rain and dirt, he could see she was pretty in the way children are before life gets its hooks into them. She wouldn't stay that way long, he suspected. The world had a way of stealing innocence from those who couldn't afford to protect it. "Hungry?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He opened the refrigerator, surveying the contents with a critical eye. He didn't keep much on hand. Eggs, cheese, some leftover chicken from the bird Rosa had roasted 3 days ago. He pulled out the basics and set them on the counter. "Scrambled eggs and toast," he said. That works perfect, sir. Thank you." "Stop calling me sir. Name's Cole." He cooked in silence, aware of her watching his every move. When he set a plate in front of her, she looked at it like he'd given her a feast. She picked up the fork, hesitated, then began to eat with controlled desperation. Not so fast as to seem rude, but fast enough to reveal how long it had been since her last meal. Cole made himself a smaller portion and sat across from her, not eating, just watching. Questions formed and died on his lips. Where had she come from? Why was she alone? Where were her parents? But asking meant getting involved, and getting involved meant caring, and caring meant pain. He'd learned that lesson the hardest way possible. When she finished eating, she carried her plate to the sink and washed it without being asked. Cole noted this with a mix of surprise and something else he couldn't name. The girl had manners. Someone had taught her right, even if life had taught her hard. "The couch in the living room pulls out," he said. "I'll get sheets. I can sleep on the couch as is, Lila said quickly. I don't want to be trouble. You're already trouble, Cole said, but there was no heat in it. Might as well be comfortable trouble. He made up the sofa bed while she stood in the doorway, still clutching that satchel, like it might try to escape. When he finished, he stood back and gestured at it. Storm should pass by morning. There's a bus to San Antonio at 9. I'll drive you to town, give you money for a ticket. I'm not going to San Antonio, Lila said quietly. Then wherever you're going, I'm not going anywhere. I'm running from somewhere. Cole felt ice settle in his chest. Running meant trouble. Running meant people looking. Running meant complications. He absolutely did not need. That's not my problem, he said. I know, she agreed. I'm not asking you to make it your problem. Just asking for one night. Like you said. They stood there in the dim light of the living room, the storm still raging outside, two people who'd stumbled into each other's path and didn't quite know what to do about it. Finally, Cole nodded toward the bed. Get some sleep, we'll figure it out in the morning. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Mr. Cole, thank you. Really, you didn't have to help me. No, he said without turning around. I didn't. He went to his room and closed the door, leaning against it like he'd just survived something. The house felt different with another person in it. The silence was the same, but it sat differently, charged with the knowledge that someone else was breathing the same air, occupying the same space. He'd gotten used to being alone, more than used to it. He'd built his entire existence around it, and now there was a girl sleeping in his living room, and he had no idea what to do about any of it. Sleep didn't come easy. He lay in bed listening to the storm batter the house, listening to the old building creak and settle, listening for sounds from the living room that never came. The girl must have been exhausted because she didn't stir. But Cole's mind wouldn't rest. He kept seeing her face through the gate, soaked and determined, kept hearing her say she had nowhere else to go, kept remembering another child's voice saying, "Love you, Daddy," in the dark. At some point after midnight, he got up and walked quietly down the hall. He stood in the doorway to the living room, watching the small shape under the blankets. She'd curled into a tight ball, the way people sleep when they're used to making themselves small, used to staying unnoticed. The satchel lay on the floor beside the bed, within arm's reach even in sleep. Whatever was in it mattered enough to keep close. Cole returned to bed and stared at the ceiling until grey dawn crept through the curtain. The storm had passed, leaving behind the clean smell of rain and the chirping of birds, grateful to have survived the night. He dressed and went to the kitchen, moving quietly so as not to wake the girl. He started coffee, then stood at the window, watching the sun burn off the last of the clouds. Behind him he heard soft footsteps. Lila appeared in the doorway, still wearing his oversized clothes, hair sticking up in directions that would have made Catherine smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Cole replied. "Coffee?" She made a face. "I'm 12. Figured you were around there. Hot chocolate? You have hot chocolate? Rosa brings it. Never drink it myself." He opened a cabinet and pulled out a tin of cocoa powder that had been sitting there untouched for months. "Sit." He made her hot chocolate while she sat at the table, quiet and watchful. When he set the mug in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it like it was precious. "The bus leaves at 9, Cole said, settling into his own chair with black coffee. "I'll take you to town. Where are you running from?" Lila looked into her mug. "Foster home in Abilene. The guy there, Mr. Patterson." He stopped, swallowed hard. He wasn't a good person. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed settled something hard in his gut. He knew about men like that. The world was full of them, predators who saw vulnerability as opportunity. "You report it?" he asked. "Who's going to believe a foster kid with a record?" "You have a record. Shoplifting when I was 10. Stole food from a gas station. Got caught." She said it matter-of-factly without shame or apology. "So when I told my caseworker about Miss Patterson, she said. I was making trouble again. Said if I kept it up, I'd end up in juvie. Cole drank his coffee and said nothing. The system was broken. He'd known that long before this girl showed up at his gate. Catherine had volunteered with foster kids back in the day. Had come home angry more times than he could count about children falling through cracks wide enough to swallow them whole. You can't stay here, he said finally. I know, and you can't go back there. I won't. They sat in silence, two people trapped in an impossible situation. Outside, the ranch was waking up. Cole could hear the cattle lowing in the distance, could see the sun climbing higher, burning away the last evidence of the storm. He had work to do, fences to check, animals to tend, a routine that had kept him sane for 20 years. A routine that didn't include a 12-year-old runaway. I can work, Lila said suddenly. I'm strong. I learn fast. I could help around the ranch. Earn my keep until you figure out what to do with me. I'm not figuring out what to do with you. That's not my job. Then I'll figure it out myself. But please, just a few days, just until I can make a plan. Cole looked at her across the table. She met his gaze without flinching, and he saw something there that reminded him too much of himself. That stubborn determination to survive. That refusal to give up, even when the world made it clear you weren't wanted. 3 days, he heard himself say. You work, you earn your meals and a place to sleep. 3 days to figure out your next move. Then you're gone. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. I promise I'll work hard. You won't regret this. I already regret it, Cole said, standing. Get dressed. Boots are by the back door. Find some that fit. We've got work to do. An hour later, Cole was discovering that Lila hadn't been lying about being a hard worker. She followed him through the morning chores without complaint, mucking out stalls, hauling feed bags that were nearly as big as she was, learning where everything went and how things worked. She asked questions when she needed to, but mostly just watched and mimicked what he did. By noon, his initial irritation had shifted into something close to grudging respect. They broke for lunch, simple sandwiches eaten standing at the kitchen counter. Lila devoured hers in minutes, then looked at him hopefully. There's more in the fridge, Cole said. Help yourself. She made another sandwich, this one with more care, like she was savoring having enough food to take her time. Cole watched her and felt something crack in the armor he'd built. She was just a kid who'd been dealt a bad hand and was trying her best to play it. That wasn't her fault. Your parents, he said. What happened? Lila finished chewing before answering. Car accident. I was 8. Dad fell asleep at the wheel driving home from my aunt's house. We hit a tree. I was in the back seat. They weren't so lucky. I'm sorry. Me too. She took another bite. My aunt couldn't take me. She had 4 kids already, and not enough money. So I went into the system, been bouncing around ever since. 4 years of foster homes, 6 homes in 4 years. Some were okay, some were okay, some weren't. The Pattersons were the worst. She said it simply, stating facts, so I left. You walked 12 miles in a storm, 13 actually. Took a bus as far as I could with the money I had, then walked the rest. Cole leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand, studying this small person who'd upended his carefully ordered world. She had spirit, had to give her that. Most kids would have given up, would have gone back, would have let the system grind them down. But Lila Reyes hadn't given up. She'd fought back the only way she knew how, by running towards something instead of just away from it. Even if that something was a locked gate and a man with a reputation for making people disappear. You knew about me, Cole said. It wasn't a question. The rumors. I heard them in town when I got off the bus. Asked someone where I could find work. Mentioned maybe trying the Maddox ranch. They looked at me like I'd suggested walking into hell. She met his eye. Figured a man everyone was scared of might be too busy being scary to ask questions about a runaway. Smart, desperate, she corrected. Smart would have been having a better plan. Cole almost smiled. Almost. Finish eating. We've got fences to check this afternoon. The days fell into a rhythm neither of them had planned, but both accepted. Lila proved herself more capable than Cole expected. She learned quickly, remembered instructions, and didn't complain about the work even when it left her exhausted. She'd appear in the kitchen each morning at dawn, dressed in his old clothes that she'd taken to wearing since hers had been ruined in the storm. She'd make herself breakfast from whatever was in the pantry, clean up after herself, and be ready when he headed out for the day's work. Cole found himself explaining things he hadn't talked about in years. How to read the weather by watching the cattle, how to spot a sick animal before symptoms became obvious, where the property lines ran, and why they mattered. She absorbed it all like she was collecting pieces of knowledge she might need someday. Maybe she was. On the third evening, the day she was supposed to leave, neither of them mentioned it. They ate dinner in the kitchen, beef stew Rosa had dropped off that morning, along with fresh bread and a look that said she had questions. Cole wasn't ready to answer. Lila washed the dishes while Cole dried, and when they were done, she headed for the living room without a word. The fourth morning she was in the kitchen at dawn as usual. Cole poured his coffee and looked at it. "Thought you were leaving, thought you were making me leave." They stared at each other across the kitchen table. A standoff neither wanted to acknowledge they'd already lost. "1 week," Cole said. "Then we figure something out." "1 week," Lila agreed. Rosa arrived on schedule that Monday, honking twice at the gate as always. Cole unlocked it and waited while she drove her old pickup truck up the drive. She climbed out with bags of groceries and stopped dead when she saw Lila standing on the porch. "Cole Maddox," Rosa said, her voice carrying that particular tone that had probably made her children behave for 40 years. "Who is this?" "Lila Reyes," Cole said. "She's helping with the ranch." "Helping?" Rosa set down the groceries and walked up to Lila, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. "How old are you, Mija?" 12, ma'am." "And where are your parents?" "Dead, ma'am." Rosa's expression softened immediately. She looked at Cole with something between approval and concern. "Inside, both of you. We need to talk." They sat around the kitchen table while Rosa unpacked groceries and asked questions in the gentle but relentless way only a grandmother could manage. Lila answered honestly, telling Rosa things she hadn't told Cole. About the foster homes, about Mr. Patterson's wandering hands, about running because staying meant giving up pieces of herself she wasn't willing to lose. Rosa listened to it all, nodding occasionally, her face growing darker with each revelation. When Lila finished, Rosa turned to Cole. "She stays," Rosa said. It wasn't a question. "Rosa, I can't." "She stays," Rosa repeated, more firmly. "Look at this house, Cole. Look at yourself. You've been dead for 20 years, just too stubborn to lie down. This girl needs help, and God knows you need something to live for besides grief and cattle." "I don't need anything. Everyone needs something." Rosa stood and put her hand on his shoulder, the way Catherine used to when she wanted him to really hear her. Catherine would have taken her in without a second thought. "You know that's true." Cole's throat tightened. He did know it. Catherine had never been able to turn away from someone who needed help. It had been one of the things he'd loved most about her, one of the things he'd lost when she died. "I'm not Catherine," he said quietly. "No," Rosa agreed, "but you were a good man once. Maybe you could be again." She left an hour later, but not before hugging Lila tight and promising to come back soon with proper clothes that actually fit. She gave Cole a look that said they'd be having more conversations about this, whether he wanted to or not. He watched her truck disappear down the drive and felt the weight of what he'd agreed to settle on his shoulders. Sheriff Tom Brennan showed up 2 days later, parking his patrol car outside the gate and waiting for Cole to let him in. Cole had been expecting this. Rosa wouldn't have been able to keep quiet about Lila, and Tom was too good at his job not to follow up. "Got an interesting call from Rosa," Tom said, following Cole into the house. "Something about you taking in a stray." "She's not a stray." "No? What is she then?" Cole didn't have a good answer for that. Lila was upstairs in what had been Michael's room, a space Cole had finally forced himself to enter. He'd cleared out enough for her to have a proper bed, though he couldn't bring himself to remove everything. The wooden horse Michael had loved still sat on the dresser. The model airplane still hung from the ceiling. Some ghosts were harder to pack away than others. "She's a kid who needed help," Cole said finally. Tom sat at the kitchen table uninvited, the way he'd done 1,000 times before Catherine died. "She's a runaway from the foster system. Got a bolo out on her from Ebetlin. Lila Reyes, age 12, missing for 5 days. She's not missing, she's here." "And why is she here, Cole? Why did you take her in?" Cole poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Tom, and sat down across from him. "You remember what Catherine used to say about foster kids? That the system failed them more often than it helped them. This girl walked 13 miles in a storm, rather than stay where she was. That tell you anything about where she was?" Tom's expression darkened. "She say why she ran. Foster father had wandering hands. She reported it. Cass worker didn't believe her. Called her a troublemaker." Cole met his friend's eyes. "So yeah, I took her in. Plan was 3 days, turned into a week. Now I don't know what the plan is. The plan is I have to report this. There are procedures. She needs to go back into the system, to the same place she ran from, to a different placement. I'll make sure of it." Tom leaned forward. "Cole, I know you're trying to help, but you can't just keep a kid without going through proper channels. There's paperwork, background checks, home studies. The state doesn't let just anyone become a foster parent. I don't want to be a foster parent. I just don't want her going back to someone who hurt her." They sat in heavy silence. Outside, Cole could hear Lila talking to the horses, her voice soft and soothing. She'd taken to Dante especially, the old gelding who'd been Cole's companion for 15 years. The horse followed her around like a loyal dog. "Let me make some calls," Tom said finally. "See what I can find out about this Patterson guy. If there's smoke, maybe we can build a fire hot enough to get him removed from the foster registry. But in the meantime, Lila needs to be documented as being here, for her safety and yours." "Fine. And Cole, you need to think about what you're doing. Really think about it. This isn't just letting a kid crash on your couch for a few days. If you're serious about keeping her safe, that's a commitment. That's opening yourself up to caring about someone again. You ready for that?" Cole didn't answer, because he didn't know. The last time he'd cared about people, the last time he'd let himself love, it had destroyed him when they were taken away. Building those walls again had been the only way to survive. Now here was Lila, slipping through cracks he hadn't known existed, making him feel things he'd thought were dead and buried. "I'll talk to her," Tom said, standing. "Get her story on record, then I'll see what I can do." Lila came in from the barn as Tom was leaving, dirt on her hands and hay in her hair. She froze when she saw the uniform, instinctive fear crossing her face. "It's okay," Cole said quickly. "This is Sheriff Brennan. He's a friend." "We need to have a conversation, Lila," Tom said gently. "About where you came from and why you're here. That okay?" She looked at Cole, who nodded. "Tell him the truth, all of it." They sat in the living room while Lila recounted her story again. Tom took notes, his face growing more grim with each detail. When she described Mr. Patterson's behavior, the way he'd corner her when his wife wasn't home, the excuses he'd make to touch her, Tom's pen pressed so hard against the paper it nearly tore through. "And your caseworker's name?" Tom asked. "Miss Hendricks. Janet Hendricks. She's the one who called you a troublemaker." "Yes, sir. Said I had a history of making things up for attention, but I wasn't making it up." Lila's voice cracked slightly. "I swear I wasn't." "I believe you," Tom said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure people who matter believe you too." After Tom left, Cole found Lila in the barn, sitting in Dante's stall with her arms wrapped around her knees. The horse stood over her protectively, and Cole had the strange thought that the old gelding had chosen her as much as she'd chosen him. "You think he'll make me go back?" she asked without looking up. Cole sat down on a hay bale outside the stall. "Tom's a good man, best man I know. If there's a way to keep you safe, He'll find it. But there might not be a way. There might not be, Cole admitted. He'd never been good at lying, and he wasn't about to start now. But until we know for sure you're staying here. That's not changing. Lila looked up at him then, and her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Cole was quiet for a long moment, searching for an answer that was true. I had a son once, he said finally. Michael, he was 7 when he died. Would have been 27 now. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man he would have become. What kind of life he would have lived. He met her gaze. You remind me that there are kids out there who deserve a chance at living. That's reason enough. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What happened to him? To your son? Fire. 20 years ago, him and my wife Catherine. I was away on business, came home to ashes. The words came easier than they had in years, like something that had been locked up was finally working its way loose. I've spent 2 decades punishing myself for not being there to save them, punishing everyone else by pushing them away. Maybe it's time I stop. I'm sorry, Lila said softly. About your family. Me too. Cole stood brushing hay from his jeans. Come on. Let's get dinner started. Rosa left enough tamales to feed an army. That night, after Lila had gone to bed, Cole sat in his study and did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He turned over the silver-framed photograph on his desk and looked at the faces of his wife and son. Catherine's smile was as bright as he remembered. Michael's gap-toothed grin, infectious even across the gulf of time. He traced their faces with one finger, feeling the familiar ache of loss. But beneath it something new. Not happiness exactly, but maybe the possibility of it. I met a girl, he said to the photograph, feeling foolish but needing to say it anyway. She's staying with me for a while. I think you'd like her, Catherine. She's got your stubbornness, your heart. He paused. I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know if I'm helping her or just making things worse. But I'm trying. Thought you'd want to know that. I'm trying. The photograph didn't answer, of course. The dead never did. But Cole felt something shift inside him anyway, some small movement in the wall he'd built around his heart. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning brought trouble in the form of Marcus Webb's silver Mercedes parked at the gate. Cole saw it when he went out for the morning chores, saw Webb himself leaning against the hood like he owned the place. Lila was still asleep, and Cole was grateful for that. He walked down to the gate alone, taking his time, letting Webb wait. Morning, Maddox. Webb called out with false cheerfulness. Got a minute to talk business? No, Cole said. Now don't be like that. I've got a new offer. 25 million for the whole spread. Cash. You could retire anywhere you want. Live like a king. Not interested. Webb's smile thinned. Heard you've got company these days. Little girl staying with you. That true? Cole's hand tightened on the gate. What happens on my property is none of your concern. See, that's where you're wrong. Everything about this property is my concern. Been researching your situation, Maddox. You've got no wife, no kids, no heirs. When you die, intestate succession laws kick in. Property goes to next of kin, and if there isn't any, well, things get complicated. Things that could be avoided if you'd just take my generous offer. Get off my land, Webb. I'm not on your land. I'm on a public road. Webb's smile widened. But others might not be so careful about boundaries. People talk in town, you know. Say you've got a runaway living with you. Unauthorized foster care. Could bring all kinds of attention from the state. Social services, child protective services could get messy. Cole stepped closer to the gate, close enough that Webb's smile faltered. You threaten that girl. You threaten me, and you'll find out why people in this town are scared to cross onto my property. Are we clear? Crystal. Webb pushed off from my car. But think about what I said. 25 million. Won't be on the table forever. He drove away in a cloud of dust, and Cole stood at the gate feeling something dark and cold settle in his chest. Webb was escalating. The man had gotten wind of Lila and saw an opportunity to apply pressure. That meant Cole needed to move faster, get things documented and legal before Webb could cause real trouble. 3 weeks pass. Tom worked his connections, putting pressure on the Abellin office to investigate the Patterson home. Lila stayed at the ranch, falling into the rhythm of the place like she'd been born to it. She learned to ride properly, spent hours with Dante exploring the property, helped Cole with everything from fixing fences to balancing the ranch books. She was smart, picking up numbers faster than most adults he'd known. Rosa came every week now instead of monthly, bringing clothes that actually fit Lila, teaching her to cook the recipes Catherine had loved, filling the house with warmth and life it hadn't seen in decades. The two of them would spend hours in the kitchen, laughing and talking in Spanish and English, while Cole pretended not to listen from his study. He'd catch himself smiling at their banter, then feel guilty for it, then remind himself that Catherine would have wanted this, would have insisted on it. One evening after dinner, Lila disappeared upstairs and came back down carrying something carefully in both hands. Cole was reading in his chair, or pretending to, when she approached. "I found this," she said, holding out a small wooden horse. "In my room." The dress. Cole's breath caught. Michael's horse. The one his grandfather had carved for him on his 5th birthday. Michael had carried it everywhere, had slept with it tucked under his pillow. After the fire, Cole had found it in the wreckage, smoke-damaged but intact, and had placed it in Michael's room where it had sat untouched for 20 years. "That belonged to my son," Cole said, his voice rough. "I figured, it's beautiful work. Hand-carved. My father made it. Took him a month." Cole set down his book. Michael loved that horse. Called it Thunder. Lila ran her fingers over the smooth wood. "Would it be okay if I kept it in my room? I'll take good care of it. I promise." Something in Cole's chest cracked open. He'd locked Michael's things away like museum pieces, like artifacts that would lose their meaning if touched. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe things were meant to be used, loved, passed on to people who could appreciate them. "He'd want someone to enjoy it," Cole said. "Keep it. Thank you." Lila clutched the horse to her chest. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you think about them every day? Your wife and son?" "Every day," Cole admitted. "Every hour, if I'm being honest." "Does it get easier?" "No. But you learn to carry it better." He looked at her, this girl who'd walked into his life during a storm and somehow stayed. "Why do you ask?" "I think about my parents all the time too. Sometimes I'm scared I'll forget what they looked like, what they sounded like. I don't want to forget them." "You won't," Cole said firmly. "The people we love don't disappear just because they're gone. They stay with us, in here." He tapped his chest. "Everything good about them becomes part of who we are." Lila nodded slowly, turning the wooden horse over in her hands. "My mom used to sing to me at night. Same song every night. You are my sunshine. Even now, when I hear it, I can feel her there. Like she's not really gone." "She's not," Cole said. "Neither is your dad. They're with you, always will be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, Lila stood, wooden horse still cradled against her chest. "Good night, Cole. Thanks for letting me keep Thunder." "Good night, Lila." He watched her climb the stairs and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Not happiness exactly, but peace. A sense that maybe the house wasn't just a mausoleum anymore. Maybe it could be a home again. That night, Cole went to his bedroom and opened the drawer of his nightstand. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a gold pocket watch. He took it out carefully, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. The engraving on the back read, "To my beloved husband, forever yours." Catherine had given it to him on their 10th anniversary, 3 years before the fire. He'd carried it every day until the night she died. After that, he couldn't bear to wear it, couldn't bear the reminder of forever cut short. But he'd kept it close. Every night before bed, he'd wind it, keeping it running even though he never looked at the time. It was a ritual, a promise to a ghost. As long as the watch kept ticking, part of Catherine was still alive. He wound it now, listening to the soft click of the mechanism, then held it up to his ear. The steady tick-tick-tick was a heartbeat, a reminder that time kept moving, whether you wanted it to or not. He set the watch on his nightstand where he could see it, and lay down, staring at the ceiling in the dark. "She's a good kid," he said to the silence. "You'd like her, Catherine. She's got your fire, your compassion." He paused. "I'm scared. Scared of losing someone again. Scared of letting myself care. But I think maybe I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life alone." The watch ticked its response. Time moves forward. You can't stop it. You can only choose whether to move with it or let it leave you behind. Cole made a decision then. Tomorrow he'd call Tom. Start the process of becoming Lila's official foster parent. Do it right. Do it legal. Make sure no one could take her away. It would mean opening himself up to scrutiny, to questions, to vulnerability he'd avoided for 2 decades. But Lila deserved someone to fight for her. And maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at being the kind of man Catherine had believed he could be. The next morning, Tom arrived with news. "Patterson's been removed from the foster registry," he said, accepting the coffee Cole offered. Investigation found 3 other girls who came forward after Lila's complaint was filed. He's facing charges. Wife filed for divorce. Relief washed through Cole. Good. That's good. Lila's caseworker, Hendricks, has been reprimanded for failure to investigate properly. They're reassigning all her cases. Tom set down his cup. Which brings us to Lila's current situation. State's willing to place her in a new foster home. Found one in Austin that specializes in older kids. They're good people. Or, Cole said slowly, she could stay here. Tom raised an eyebrow. Officially? Officially? I want to file for emergency foster placement, then start the adoption process if she's willing. Cole, are you sure? This isn't like taking care of cattle. This is a child who's been through trauma. She'll need patience, therapy, support, things you haven't had to think about in a long time. I know what she needs, Cole said. She needs stability, safety, someone who won't give up on her. I can provide that. You'll have to pass background checks, home studies. Social workers will be all over this place, all over your life. Let them. Tom studied his friend for a long moment. You've changed. These past few weeks, you're different. I'm trying to be. Cole met his eyes. Help me do this right, Tom. Help me keep her safe. All right. Tom pulled out his phone. I'll make some calls, set up meetings with child services, get the paperwork started. But Cole, once you start this, you can't back out. You'll be responsible for her, legally, emotionally, all of it. You understand that? I understand. After Tom left, Cole found Lila in the barn brushing Dante. She'd gotten better at it, knew just where the old horse liked to be scratched, how much pressure to use on the currycomb. Dante stood with his eyes half closed, completely content. Need to talk to you about something, Cole said, leaning against the stall door. Lila stopped brushing and turned to face him, apprehension crossing her features. She'd learned to read his moods, could tell when something serious was coming. Tom says they found a good foster home for you in Iest, family that specializes in older kids. They're willing to take you in. Her face fell. Oh, okay. When do I have to leave? That's not what I'm saying. Cole took a breath. What I'm saying is, there's another option. You could stay here, officially. I'd become your foster parent. Eventually adopt you if that's something you'd want. Lila stared at him, the brush hanging forgotten in her hand. You want to adopt me? I'm saying I want you to have a choice. A real one. You can go to Austin, start fresh with people who know what they're doing, or you can stay here with a stubborn old cowboy who's probably going to mess things up. but will try his best not. You're not old, Lila said automatically, then seemed to register the rest of what he'd said. You really mean it? You'd want me to stay? I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it. She set down the brush and walked over to him. Can I think about it? Cole nodded, though her hesitation stung more than he wanted to admit. Take whatever time you need. It's not that I don't want to stay, Lila said quickly. It's just, I've never had someone want to keep me before. Every other place, I was temporary, something to tolerate until they could pass me off to someone else. I'm scared if I say yes, you'll change your mind. I won't change my mind. You don't know that. People always change their minds about me. Cole knelt down so they were eye level. Listen to me. I'm not those people. When I make a promise, I keep it. If you stay, you stay. No temporary, no trial period. You'd be my daughter. You understand what that means. Tears welled up in her eyes. I understand. So think about it. Take your time. Whatever you decide, I'll support it, she nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Can I ask you something? Always. Why? Why would you want me? You don't even really know me. Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When Catherine and Michael died, I thought my life was over. Thought the only thing left was waiting to join them. I stopped living, just existed. Going through motions. He met her eyes. Then you showed up at my gate in a storm, and something changed. You reminded me that life keeps going, whether we want it to or not. That there are people out there who need help, who deserve a chance. And maybe I deserve a chance too. A chance to be someone other than a ghost, haunting his own property. So I'm like therapy for you. There was no accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. No, you're a kid who needs a home, and I'm someone who can provide one. Everything else is just details we'll figure out along the way. Lila hugged him then, quick and fierce, before stepping back like she'd surprised herself. I want to stay. I don't need time to think about it. I want to stay here, with you. Something warm and terrifying flooded through Cole's chest. He'd made the offer expecting her to need time, maybe expecting her to choose Austin. The fact that she wanted to stay, wanted him, was overwhelming in a way he hadn't anticipated. Okay then, he managed. Okay, we'll make it happen. Thank you. She smiled through her tears. Dad, the word hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't been called that in 20 years, hadn't expected to ever hear it again. His vision blurred and he realized he was crying, something he hadn't done since the day he buried his family. You're welcome, he said, his voice breaking. Daughter. They stood there in the barn with Dante watching over them, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to try being whole again. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be hard days, mistakes, moments of doubt, but they'd face them together. That was something. That was everything. The paperwork began the following week. Social workers came to inspect the house, interview Cole, observe his interactions with Lila. He answered their questions honestly, held nothing back about his isolation, his grief, the reputation he'd built as the hermit of Redemption Springs. To his surprise, they seemed to view his honesty as a strength rather than a weakness. Miss Maddox, the lead caseworker, said, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been doing this work for 30 years. I've seen a lot of foster situations, some good, most adequate, some terrible. What you're offering, Lila, is rare. Stability, resources, genuine care. The fact that you're willing to face your own demons in order to help her speaks volumes about your character. I'm not a saint, Cole said. I'm just a man trying to do right by a kid who deserves better than she's gotten. That's exactly what makes you suitable. Patricia closed her folder. We'll need to do a background check, financial review, and home study. But barring any major red flags, I see no reason why you can't be approved for emergency foster placement within 2 weeks. 2 weeks felt like an eternity and no time at all. Cole found himself looking at the ranch through new eyes, seeing it as a home for a child rather than a monument to loss. He repainted Lila's room with her help, letting her choose a soft blue that reminded her of the sky. They hung curtains together, organized her clothes in the closet, made the space truly hers. The wooden horse sat proudly on her nightstand. Rosa arrived one Saturday with a carload of supplies, proper bedding, school supplies, books she thought Lila might enjoy. She also brought a box of photographs from before the fire. "I've been holding on to these," Rosa told Cole while Lila was outside. "Catherine gave them to me years ago, said she was making copies. I forgot I had them until I was cleaning out my attic." She opened the box. "I think it's time they came home." Cole looked through the photographs with hands that shook slightly. Catherine pregnant, glowing with joy, Michael as a baby, then a toddler, then a gap-toothed 7-year-old. Family photos at Christmas, birthdays, ordinary Tuesdays, a life captured in frozen moments. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for keeping them safe." Catherine would want Lila to know about them, about the family that came before. Not to replace them, but to understand the love this house once held. Rosa squeezed his hand, and can hold again. That evening Cole sat with Lila on the porch and showed her the photographs. He told her stories about Catherine's laugh, about Michael's fascination with airplanes, about Sunday dinners and summer barbecues, and all the small moments that made up a life together. "They sound wonderful," Lila said, studying a photo of Catherine holding baby Michael. "They were." Cole set the photo album aside. "I want you to know about them, want you to understand that you're not replacing them. Nobody could. But you're starting something new, a different kind of family, one that honors what came before, while building something of its own." "I like that," Lila said. "A different kind of family." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun set over the ranch. The cattle were settling in for the night, their lowing a familiar soundtrack. A hawk circled overhead, riding the evening thermals. Everything was as it had been for 20 years, and yet completely different. "Cole," Lila's voice was small, "can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm scared. Not of you. Just scared that this is too good to be true. That something will happen, and I'll lose this, lose you." Cole understood that fear intimately. He'd lived with it every day since the fire. The terror that caring about anything would invite disaster. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "Scared of failing you. Scared of not being enough. But being scared doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we're brave enough to try anyway." "Is that what you told yourself before you let me in?" "No. I told myself I was making a mistake, that I should send you away. That opening, that gate would destroy the peace I'd built." He looked at her. "But you know what? That peace was just another word for being dead while still breathing. You gave me a reason to actually live again. So yeah, I'm scared, but I'm also grateful." Lila leaned against his shoulder, and Cole put his arm around her. They stayed like that until the stars came out. Two people learning to trust in second chances, in the possibility that broken things could be mended if you were patient enough to try. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by certified mail. Cole signed for it at the gate, noting the return address from a law firm in Houston. His stomach tightened with instinct that told him this was trouble before he'd even opened it. Inside was a notice of claim against the estate of Catherine Maddox. Cole read it 3 times, each pass, making his blood run colder. Catherine's brother, James Thornton, was contesting the inheritance of the Maddox ranch. The legal document claimed that as Catherine's only living blood relative, James had rights to her share of the marital property. Furthermore, it cited a clause in the original property deed that Cole had forgotten existed. If the Maddox line died without heirs, the property would revert to the spouse's family. Cole's hands shook as he read. He'd never gotten along with James. The man had opposed Catherine's marriage from the start, claimed she was wasting herself on a cowboy when she could have married someone from her own social class back in Boston. After the fire, James had attended the funeral with barely concealed satisfaction, had made veiled comments about karma and poor choices. Cole had written him off as a bitter man, and hadn't thought about him since. Now here he was, 20 years later, coming for the ranch like a vulture, circling carrion. Cole called Tom immediately. The sheriff arrived within an hour, read through the documents with a deepening frown. "This is Marcus Webb's doing," Tom said. "Has to be. James Thornton hasn't shown interest in this property for 2 decades. Suddenly he files a claim right when you're about to adopt Lila. Someone put him up to this. Webb wants the ranch. He's been trying to buy it for 5 years, and now he's found a backdoor. If James can prove a claim to Catherine's share, it opens up questions about the estate. Could tie you up in court for years." Tom set down the papers. "There's something else. The legal theory they're using. It only works if you die without heirs. With Lila in the picture, once the adoption is finalized, their claim falls apart. So this is about stopping the adoption. More than that, it's about proving you have no legal right to keep her. If they can show you're an unfit guardian, if they can delay the process long enough, Lila gets moved to another placement, and without an heir, their claim to the property becomes stronger." Cole felt rage building in his chest, the kind of cold fury he hadn't felt since the night he came home to ashes. "I won't let them take her, or this land. We need to fight this on 2 fronts. Legal and investigative." Tom pulled out his phone. "I'm calling in some favors. Something about this doesn't add up. James Thornton lives in Boston, works for some investment firm. Why would he suddenly care about a ranch in Texas unless someone made it worth his while?" Over the next 3 days, Tom worked his network while Cole prepared for war. He pulled out every document related to the property, the original deed from his grandfather's time, his marriage certificate, Catherine's will that left everything to him, death certificates, property tax records going back 40 years, everything that proved the Maddox ranch was his by right and by law. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rosa, who cleaned houses in town for extra income, mentioned that she'd overheard something while working at the mayor's office. Marcus Webb had been in a meeting with someone from Boston the previous week. A man in an expensive suit who didn't fit in Redemption Springs. Had to be Thornton, Tom said when Rosa reported this. Webb's been planning this for months, maybe longer. But why? Lila asked. She'd been listening quietly, her face pale. Why does Mr. Webb want the ranch so badly? Cole had been wondering the same thing. 25 million was a lot of money to offer for cattle land, even 10,000 acres of it. There had to be something more. The gold, he said suddenly. He knows about the gold. Tom's eyes widened. You never told me you were still working that vein. Didn't tell anyone. Grandfather found it in the 30s, kept it quiet. Passed the knowledge to my father, who passed it to me. It's not a huge deposit, but it's enough. Maybe 8-10 million worth if you knew where to look. How would Webb find out? Mineral surveys, Cole said. Pieces clicking into place. He said he'd been researching the property. Probably had geologists run surveys from the edges, or pulled old mining records. The deposit runs under part of the eastern pasture. If he got close enough to the property line, he could have detected it. So this isn't just about the land, Tom said. It's about what's under it. And if James Thornton can claim a share of the estate, he and Webb can force a sale. Split the proceeds. Cole's jaw tightened. They're not getting it, either of them. That evening, Cole sat in his study with the legal documents spread across his desk. Lila knocked softly and entered, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate that Rosa had taught her to make. Thought you could use this, she said, setting one in front of him. Thanks. He took a sip, grateful for the warmth. You should be in bed. School tomorrow. They'd enrolled Lila in Redemption Springs Elementary 2 weeks ago. She'd been nervous at first, but her teachers reported she was smart and eager to learn, making friends despite being the new kid. Couldn't sleep, Lila admitted. I keep thinking about what those men said, that they want to take the ranch, take me away from you. That's not going to happen. But what if it does? What if they find some law that says you can't keep me? What if I have to leave? Cole set down his mug and turned to face her fully. Listen to me. I've already lost one family to circumstances beyond my control. I won't lose another. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to fight, I will keep you safe. I promise. You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. I can try, and I will. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. There's something I need to tell you about this ranch and what's really at stake. Lila sat, clutching her hot chocolate, and Cole told her about the gold, about his grandfather's discovery, the family secret passed down through generations, the wealth hidden beneath their feet. He explained Webb's obsession, James Thornton's greed, the legal trap they were trying to spring. So they want the gold, Lila said when he finished. And they're using me to get it. They're using everything they can. But they made a mistake. They showed their hand too early. Now we know what we're fighting. What do we do? Cole appreciated the not what will you do, but what do we do? She saw herself as part of this fight, part of this family. That meant everything. We fight smart. Tom's investigating the connection between Webb and Thornton. If we can prove they're conspiring to defraud the estate, their claim falls apart. In the meantime, we accelerate the adoption process. Once you're legally my daughter, the inheritance clause becomes moot. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky. He met her eyes. Can you be patient? Can you trust me to handle this? I trust you, Lila said without hesitation. I'm just scared. Me too. But we're scared together. That counts for something. The next morning brought another surprise. Cole was in the barn when he heard a vehicle approaching. Not the usual sound of Rosa's truck or Tom's patrol car. This was heavier, more aggressive. He walked to the gate and found 3 men in a surveyor's truck, parked on the road. Help you? Cole called out. Geological survey, the driver said, holding up a clipboard. Got authorization to conduct mineral testing on this property. Authorization from who? James Thornton. He's listed as partial owner pending legal review. He's not the owner of anything, and you're not coming onto my land. The man's expression hardened. Sir, we have legal documentation. I don't care what documentation you have. This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now or I call the sheriff. The sheriff can't stop a legally authorized survey. Cole pulled out his phone and dialed. Tom answered on the second ring. Got 3 men at my gate, claiming they have authorization to survey for minerals. That legal? Hell no, Tom said. Not while the estate is in dispute. That's jumping the gun by about 6 months of legal process. Put me on speaker. Cole did. Tom's voice rang out with authority. This is Sheriff Brennan. You're in violation of property rights during active litigation. Clear out now or I'm coming down there with a warrant for trespassing. The surveyors exchanged glances. The driver muttered something into his own phone, listened, then nodded. We'll be back, he said to Cole. With proper authorization. Looking forward to it, Cole replied. His voice. They drove away in a cloud of dust, and Cole stood at the gate, feeling the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. Webb and Thornton were escalating, testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with. It was going to get worse before it got better. Tom arrived 20 minutes later with news. Did some digging into James Thornton's finances. Turns out he's in deep with some bad investments. Lost most of his money in a tech startup that went belly up. He's desperate, which makes him dangerous. And Webb's exploiting that, more than exploiting. I found wire transfers from Webb to Thornton, 200,000 over the past 3 months. That's conspiracy to defraud right there. Tom pulled out a folder. Also found something else. The fire 20 years ago. The investigation was closed too quickly. I requested the original case files. Cole's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying the official report blamed faulty wiring, but there were inconsistencies. Accelerant traces that were never followed up on. A witness who reported seeing a vehicle leaving the property around the time the fire started. The investigator noted it but never pursued it. Why not? Because James Thornton called in favors. He had connections with the state fire marshal's office through his firm, put pressure to close the case quickly, called it a tragic accident, said the family wanted privacy. Tom met Cole's eyes. Cole, I think James started that fire. I think he tried to kill you for the inheritance. 20 years ago, the world tilted. Cole grabbed the fence to steady himself, his vision going dark at the edges. Catherine, Michael, gone not because of an accident, not because of fate, but because of greed. Because James Thornton wanted money and saw murder as an acceptable means to get it. He killed them, Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper. He killed my family. I can't prove it yet, but I'm working with the state police to reopen the investigation. The evidence is still there, buried in old files. We can build a case. Cole's grief transformed into something harder, sharper. Rage so pure it burned away everything else. For 20 years he'd blamed himself, carried the guilt of not being there to save them, but it hadn't been his fault. It had been murder, cold, calculated murder by a man who valued money over human life. I'll kill him, Cole said flatly. No, you won't. Tom gripped his shoulder. You'll let me handle it, legally. You'll stay here, protect Lila, and let justice work the way it's supposed to. Because if you go after Thornton, you lose everything. You lose Lila. You understand me? Cole understood, and hated it. But Tom was right. Lila needed him here, needed him free and able to fight for her. Revenge could wait, had already waited 20 years. It could wait a little longer. How long to build the case? Cole asked, through gritted teeth. Weeks, maybe months. But Cole, this changes everything. If we can prove James was involved in the fire, his claim to the estate evaporates. He can't inherit from someone he murdered. It's called the Slayer rule. And Webb, if we can tie him to James knowing about the fire, he's an accessory after the fact. At minimum, his business in this county is done. At maximum, he's looking at serious prison time. Cole's mind raced, calculating angles and possibilities. 20 years of isolation had taught him patience. 20 years of managing a ranch alone had taught him strategy. He could use both now. What do you need from me? He asked. Everything you remember about the days leading up to the fire. Any interactions with James, any threats, any unusual conversations, anything that might establish motive and opportunity. Tom pulled out a notebook. And I need you to trust me. Trust the system. Can you do that? Cole looked back at the house where Lila was probably doing homework at the kitchen table. Safe and warm and unaware of how close danger was circling. He thought about Catherine's smile, Michael's laugh, the life that had been stolen from all of them. I can do that, he said, for Lila, for them. I can do that. They spent the next hour going through Cole's memories of the weeks before the fire. James had visited once, ostensibly to check on his sister. He'd walked the property, asked questions about the operation, made comments about how valuable the land must be. At the time, Cole had dismissed it as idle curiosity. Now every word took on sinister meaning. The cavalry saber hung on the wall of Cole's study, a relic from another war, another time. His great-grandfather had carried it through the Civil War, had brought it home to Texas and passed it down through the generations. It had hung untouched for decades, a piece of history gathering dust. Now Cole took it down, feeling the weight of it in his hands, testing the edge against his thumb, dull from years of neglect. He carried it to the workshop and spent an hour at the grinding wheel, bringing back the edge, making it sharp enough to matter. The rhythmic sound of steel on stone was meditative. gave him something to focus on besides the rage that threatened to consume him. When he finished, the blade gleamed in the workshop light, ready for whatever came next. "That's kind of scary," Lila said from the doorway. Cole looked up, realizing he'd been so focused he hadn't heard her approach. "It was my great-grandfather's. Figured it was time to restore it. Because of the bad men, the ones who want to take the ranch. Because it's good to be prepared." He set the saber aside and wiped his hands on a rag. "How was school?" "Fine. Kids asked why I'm living with the scary hermit. I told them you're not scary, just misunderstood." Despite everything, Cole almost smiled. "Misunderstood? That's diplomatic. Rosa taught me that word." Lila came into the workshop and sat on a stool. "Are we going to be okay?" "Really? We're going to fight," Cole said. "Fight smart and fight hard. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If things get dangerous, if men come here who don't belong, you run. Don't try to help. Don't try to be brave. Just run and hide until it's safe." "Where would I run?" "Good question." The ranch was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor. If trouble came, Lila would have nowhere to go except into the wilderness. Cole made a mental note to teach her the property better, show her the hidden places, the old line shacks his grandfather had built that still stood scattered across the 10,000 acres. "I'll show you," he said. "Tomorrow after school. There are places on the property, safe places where you can hide if you need to. Places nobody would think to look." "You really think it'll come to that?" "I think it's better to be prepared for something that doesn't happen than unprepared for something that does." That evening, Cole sat with Tom and Rosa at the kitchen table, planning their defense. Rosa had insisted on being included, claiming she'd known Catherine and wouldn't let her memory be desecrated by greedy men. Tom had given up arguing with her after 5 minutes. "We need to secure the property," Tom said, spreading a map of the ranch across the table. "Webb's already sent surveyors. Next could be actual trespassers. People looking to establish presence, maybe plant evidence that you're an unfit guardian. I've got motion sensors at the main gate," Cole said. "But there are a dozen other ways onto the property if someone's determined enough." "Then we need more sensors. Cameras. I can get some deputies to do drive-bys, but we're stretched thin as it is." Tom marked several points on the map. "These are your vulnerable access points. Old service roads, breaks in the fence line, the creek crossing. If I were planning to cause trouble, these are where I'd enter." "I'll reinforce them," Cole said. "Set up alerts." "I can help," Rosa offered. "I know people in town, people who remember what this family meant to Redemption Springs. They'll volunteer to keep watch. I don't want to put civilians at risk." "Too late. You're already part of this community, whether you like it or not. People care about you, Cole. About Lila. They want to help." Over the next week, Cole fortified the ranch like he was preparing for siege. Motion sensors went up along the perimeter. Trail cameras monitored the access points. He taught Lila the property boundaries, showed her the old line shacks, made sure she knew how to find them even in the dark. They practiced emergency procedures, what to do if strangers appeared, where to run, how to signal for help. Lila took it all seriously, understanding that this wasn't a game. She helped install sensors, learned to read the security monitors Cole set up in the house, memorized the radio frequencies Tom gave them for emergency contact. She was 12 years old and learning to live in a state of siege, and Cole hated that this was necessary, hated that her childhood was being stolen by grown men's greed. The adoption paperwork moved forward, despite the legal challenges. Patricia Chen expedited the process, citing the threats against Lila's placement as grounds for emergency measures. Cole went through interview after interview, background check after background check, opening his life to scrutiny in ways he never had before. "You've lived alone for 20 years, one evaluator noted. "How do you plan to adjust to having a child full-time?" "By making mistakes and learning from them," Cole answered honestly. "By asking for help when I need it. By remembering that being a parent isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up every day and trying your best. And if the legal challenges succeed, if James Thornton gains control of the estate, then I'll fight him in court until there's nothing left to fight for. But Lila stays with me. That's non-negotiable." The evaluator made notes, her expression unreadable. Cole left the interview, not knowing if he'd helped or hurt his case. All he could do was tell the truth and hope it was enough. Tom's investigation progressed faster than expected. The state police reopened the fire case, brought in new forensic experts to review the evidence. The accelerant traces that had been noted, but dismissed 20 years ago, suddenly became crucial. Chemical analysis showed it was kerosene, common enough but distinctive in how it burned. The pattern suggested multiple ignition points, inconsistent with electrical fire. The witness who'd seen a vehicle leaving the property was tracked down. She was elderly now, her memory fuzzy, but she remembered enough. A dark sedan, expensive-looking, driving fast away from the Maddox ranch around midnight. She'd thought it odd at the time but hadn't connected it to the fire that started an hour later. James Thornton had rented a dark sedan that week. The rental records still existed, buried in a storage facility in Dallas. Tom found them, cross-referenced the dates, built a timeline that placed James on the property the night of the fire. "We've got enough for an arrest warrant," Tom told Cole. "State police are moving on it tomorrow. They'll bring James in for questioning. Will he talk? Maybe. Maybe not. But once he's in custody, Webb loses his partner in this scheme. The legal claim falls apart. You win." "I don't feel like I'm winning," Cole said. They were sitting on the porch at sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple that Catherine had loved. "My wife and son are still dead. 20 years I blamed myself, carried that guilt like it was mine to carry. And it was all a lie. It was never your fault, Cole. You know that now." Knowing it and feeling it are different things. Cole took a sip of the whiskey he still poured, but rarely drank. "I'm angry. Angrier than I've been since the night it happened. Angry at James, angry at Webb, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Use that anger. Channel it into protecting what you've built with Lila. That's the best revenge. Living well, loving openly, refusing to let them destroy you twice." Cole nodded, knowing Tom was right but struggling to accept it. Part of him wanted blood, wanted to make James pay in ways the legal system never could. But he'd made a promise to stay here, to let justice work properly, to be the father Lila needed. Inside the house, Lila was doing homework at the kitchen table. Through the window, Cole could see her bent over a textbook, pencil in hand, brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up and caught him watching, smiled and waved. He waved back, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a physical thing. "She's good for you," Tom observed. "Brought you back to life. I'm good for her too, I think." "Hope. You are. Best thing that could have happened to her." Tom stood, stretching. "I should get going. Early morning tomorrow with the arrest." "You going to be okay?" "I'm going to be prepared." Cole gestured to the saber mounted above the door, newly sharpened and ready. "Whatever comes." Tom followed his gaze and shook his head. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." After Tom left, Cole went inside and helped Lila with her math homework. He was rusty at algebra, hadn't used it in decades, but together they worked through the problem. It was normal, domestic, the kind of evening he'd thought he'd never have again. Later, after Lila went to bed, he sat in his study and wrote a letter. Not to Catherine this time, but to Lila. He wrote about what she meant to him, about the second chance she'd given him at being a father, at being human again. He wrote about his fears and hopes, about the promises he intended to keep. He sealed the letter and put it in his safe, along with his will that now named her as his sole heir. If something happened to him, she'd be taken care of. Rosa would make sure of that. The call came at 3 in the morning. Cole was awake, had been for hours, unable to sleep with anticipation of what the new day would bring. When his phone rang, he grabbed it immediately. "Cole, it's Tom. We've got a problem." Cole's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? James Thornton is gone. State police went to arrest him at his hotel in Houston. Room was cleared out. Looks like someone tipped him off. Webb? That's my guess. We've got an APB out, but James has a 12-hour head start. Could be anywhere by now. Or he could be coming here, Cole said, his military training kicking in. If he knows we're onto him, if he knows his legal claim is falling apart, he's got nothing to lose. I'm sending deputies. They'll be there in 20 minutes. I'll be ready. Cole hung up and moved quickly through the house, checking locks, arming the security system, grabbing the hunting rifle from his gun safe. The cavalry saber went into his belt. He was pulling on boots when Lila appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Get dressed. Warm clothes, sturdy shoes, pack a bag with essentials. Do it now." She heard the urgency in his voice and didn't argue. Within 5 minutes she was back, dressed and carrying a backpack. Cole had the truck keys in his hand. "We're leaving?" she asked. "Maybe. Depends on what happens in the next hour." He knelt down to her level. "Remember what we practiced, the emergency procedures. Hide in the old line shack by the creek. Don't come out until you hear the all-clear signal. That's right. If I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just run and hide and wait for Tom or me to come get you. Understand?" "I understand." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Cole, I'm scared." "Me too. But scared means we're smart enough to know the danger is real. We'll get through this." He hugged her tight. "I promise." They waited in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the monitors that showed the property perimeter. The motion sensors were silent. The cameras showed nothing but darkness and the occasional passing deer. But Cole's instincts, honed by years in the military and decades managing dangerous cattle, told him something was wrong. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. At 3:45, the eastern perimeter alarm triggered. Cole's eyes snapped to that monitor. 2 vehicles, headlights off, moving slowly along the old service road that hadn't been used in years. They stopped just outside the fence line. "Tom," Cole said into his radio, "I've got company. Eastern approach. 2 vehicles. Where are those deputies?" 10 minutes out. Sit tight. Copy that." Cole turned to Lila. "Time to go. Out the back. Move quiet. Head for the line shack. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Go." She hesitated, then grabbed her backpack and ran. Cole watched on the monitors as she disappeared into the darkness, moving fast and low like he'd taught her. Good girl. Smart girl. His daughter. On the eastern monitor, men were climbing over the fence. Cole counted 6 of them, all dressed in dark clothes, moving with purpose. Not surveyors this time. Not lawyers. These were hired muscle, and they weren't here to talk. Cole checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded, chambered around. The cavalry saber felt solid at his hip. He wasn't a young man anymore, but he'd been a ranger once, had trained for situations exactly like this. Muscle memory kicked in, calm settling over him like an old coat. The men split into 2 groups. 3 moved toward the house. 3 headed for the barn, looking for him, looking for Lila. They wouldn't find her, but they'd find him. Cole moved to the front door, positioned himself where he'd have clear sightlines, where the porch would give him cover. His phone buzzed. A text from Tom. 5 minutes. 5 minutes could feel like forever, when men with bad intentions were approaching your home. Cole steadied his breathing, centered himself, and waited. The first man stepped into the circle of light from the porch lamp. Cole stepped onto the porch with his rifle raised. That's far enough. The man froze, hands instinctively going up. He was young, maybe 30, with the build of someone who spent time in a gym, but had never been in a real fight, the kind of muscle Webb would hire cheap. "We're just here to serve papers," the man said, his voice shaking slightly. "At 4 in the morning, over my fence. Try again. Movement to his left. Cole swung the rifle that direction, spotting another man trying to flank him. Don't. I was a ranger for 12 years. I don't miss. The second man stopped. Behind Cole, inside the house, something crashed. They'd sent someone through the back. Amateur hour. Cole had locked every entrance except the front, and the back door had a bell rigged to it that he'd heard the moment it opened. "Tell your friend inside to come out slowly," Cole said, his voice cold and calm. "Hands where I can see them." After a long pause, a third man emerged from the house, hands raised. He was older, harder looking, with scars that suggested he'd done this kind of work before. "You're outnumbered," the scarred man said. "6 of us. 1 of you. Math doesn't work in your favor, old man. 6 of you I can see," Cole corrected. "Question is, how many of me can you see?" It was a bluff, but it worked. The men exchanged uncertain glances. The property was dark, full of shadows and hiding places. For all they knew, Cole had armed ranch hands positioned around them. Headlights suddenly blazed to life from the direction of the main gate. Tom's patrol car, followed by 2 more vehicles. Deputies poured out, weapons drawn, tactical lights cutting through the darkness. "Sheriff's Department, hands in the air. All of you." The hired men complied immediately, knowing when they were beat. Tom and his deputies moved in, securing and searching them, while Cole kept his rifle trained on the scarred man who'd entered his house. "Who hired you?" Tom demanded. Silence. The men had clearly been paid enough to keep quiet, at least initially, but Tom was experienced at this, knew how to apply pressure. Within 10 minutes, the youngest one cracked. "Guy named Webb, Marcus Webb. Paid us 5,000 each to come here, scare the old man, maybe rough him up a little, said he was in a property dispute, wanted to convince the guy to sell. Breaking and entering, trespassing with intent. Assault," Tom listed. "You boys just earned yourselves felony charges." Hope Webb paid up front. They were loading the men into patrol cars when another vehicle approached from the east. A dark sedan moving fast. Headlights off. Cole recognized the description immediately. "Tom," he said quietly, "that's James Thornton." The sedan skidded to a stop when it saw the police presence. For a moment Cole thought Thornton might try to run, but the car door opened and James stepped out, and even from a distance Cole could see he was done running. James Thornton looked like he'd aged 20 years in the past few weeks. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loose, his face haggard, but his eyes burned with desperate fury as he spotted Cole on the porch. "You," James said, walking forward, despite Tom's warnings to stop. "You should have died in that fire. This should all be mine. Catherine was my sister. This land, this money, it should have been mine when she died." "Get on the ground," Tom ordered, hand on his weapon. "No." James kept walking, and Cole saw he had something in his hand. A gun, small caliber, shaking as James raised it. 20 years I've waited. 20 years watching you live in my sister's house, spending my inheritance. Well, it ends tonight." Time slowed. Cole saw Tom reaching for his weapon, saw the deputies scrambling for cover, saw James's finger tightening on the trigger. His military training kicked in. He dropped the rifle, drew the cavalry saber in one smooth motion, and threw it like his great-grandfather had taught him when he was Michael's age. The blade spun through the air, catching moonlight, and struck James in the shoulder. Not a killing blow, but enough. The gun fired wild, bullet thunking into the porch post. James dropped, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Deputies rushed forward, securing the weapon. Securing James, Cole stood on the porch, breathing hard, watching as paramedics tended to James's wound. The saber lay on the ground where it had fallen, after impact, bloodied but true, just as it had been when his great-grandfather wielded it a century and a half ago. Tom approached, his expression a mix of relief and exasperation. Hell of a throw. Family tradition. Cole's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "He killed them, Tom. He just admitted it. 20 years, and I finally heard him confess. I heard it too. So did 6 deputies and a dozen witnesses. He's done. Tom gripped Cole's shoulder. It's over. But it wasn't quite over yet. Marcus Webb's silver Mercedes appeared at the gate, the developer apparently unable to resist seeing the fruits of his scheme in person. He stepped out of the car with his usual arrogance, then froze when he saw the patrol cars, the deputies, James Thornton being loaded into an ambulance in handcuffs. "Sheriff Brennan," Webb called out, his voice strained but attempting confidence. "What's going on here? I received a call that there was trouble at the Maddox property." "Trouble you orchestrated," Tom said, walking toward him. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to defraud, and about 6 other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. Turn around, hands behind your back." "This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything. I'm a legitimate businessman. You hired thugs to terrorize a man and a child. You conspired with a murderer to steal property through fraud. We've got bank records, wire transfers, recorded phone calls." Tom produced handcuffs. "Turn around." Webb's face went pale. He looked at Cole, perhaps hoping for some mercy, some compromise. Cole stared back with cold fury, thinking of Catherine and Michael, thinking of Lila hiding in the darkness, thinking of 20 years of grief caused by this man's greed. "I hope it was worth it," Cole said quietly. "Every penny you thought you'd make. Hope it was worth destroying lives for." Webb had no answer. Tom cuffed him and led him to a patrol car, reading him his rights in a tone that suggested he was enjoying every word. Cole pulled out his radio. "Lila, all clear. It's safe. Come home." Long minutes passed. Cole scanned the darkness, worried she might not have heard, might be too scared to come out. Then he saw her, running across the pasture, backpack bouncing, headed straight for him. She hit him like a small missile, arms wrapping around his waist, face buried in his shirt. "I heard gunshots," she said, voice muffled. I was so scared. I know, but I'm okay. We're okay." He held her tight, feeling her shake. "It's over now. The bad men are gone. All of them. Did you catch the man who hurt your family?" "We did. He confessed. He'll go to prison for what he did." Lila pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "Are you okay? Really?" Cole thought about that question. Was he okay? 20 years of grief had found its source. 20 years of guilt had been lifted. The men who'd destroyed his life were in custody. His ranch was secure. Lila was safe. Was he okay? "I will be," he said honestly. "We both will be." Dawn was breaking as the last patrol car drove away, taking the hired thugs, James Thornton and Marcus Webb, into a custody they wouldn't escape. Rosa arrived as the sun crested the horizon, having heard about the trouble on her police scanner. She took one look at Lila's exhausted face and Cole's blood-stained shirt and went into action, herding them into the house, making coffee and breakfast, fussing over them like the grandmother she'd become. "Dios mio," she muttered, scrambling eggs with fierce determination. "All this excitement at your age, Cole. Your heart could have given out." "My heart's been dead for 20 years, Cole said. "Figured it was about time it started beating again." "Well, next time, let it start beating during daylight hours at a reasonable volume." She set plates in front of them. "Eat, both of you. You've been through hell tonight." They ate in silence, too exhausted for conversation. Lila fell asleep at the table, head on her arms, still clutching a piece of toast. Cole carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, watched her settle into sleep with the wooden horse clenched in one hand. "Sleep well, daughter," he whispered. "You're safe now. Always will be." He went to his own room but couldn't sleep. Too wired, too full of emotions he didn't know how to process. Instead, he went to his study and picked up Catherine's wedding ring from where he'd kept it in a drawer for 20 years. The ring was a simple gold band, worn smooth by years of Catherine wearing it. He'd slipped it off her finger at the hospital, had kept it close ever since, unable to wear it but unable to let it go. Now he held it up to the morning light streaming through the window, watching it catch and reflect the sun. "I got him," Cole said to the silence, to the ghost of his wife who'd waited 20 years for justice. James is going to prison for what he did to you, to Michael, to us. His voice cracked. I'm sorry it took so long. Sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I got him. The ring seemed to glow in the light, warm against his palm. Cole closed his fist around it and let himself cry for the first time since the funeral. Not tears of grief this time, but something else. Release, maybe. Resolution. The burden he'd carried for 2 decades was lifting, and beneath it he found not emptiness but possibility. He cried for Catherine and Michael, for the life they'd been denied. He cried for the man he'd been, lost to grief and isolation. He cried for Lila, who'd walked into a storm and found a broken man and had somehow helped him become whole again. He cried until he had nothing left, until the tears stopped and he could breathe again without the weight crushing his chest. When he finally emerged from his study hours later, he found Tom waiting on the porch with coffee and an update. The sheriff looked as tired as Cole felt. James is singing like a canary, Tom said. Gave us everything. How he planned the fire, how he paid off the fire investigator, how Webb approached him 5 months ago with the scheme to contest the estate. State prosecutor says it's the cleanest case he's seen in years. Good. Cole accepted the coffee gratefully. What happens now? James is looking at murder charges, arson, fraud. He'll plead out, probably. Try to avoid trial, but he's going away for life, Cole. He'll die in prison. Tom paused. Webb's lawyer is already trying to make deals, but we've got him dead to rights on conspiracy. He's looking at 15 to 20. Not enough. Never is. But it's what we've got. Tom drank his coffee. The important thing is, their claim on the estate is dead. Property's yours, free and clear, and with James's confession on record, there's no question about Lila's adoption going through. Patricia Chen called this morning. She's fast-tracking the final approval. You'll be her legal father within the week. Cole let that sink in. A week. 1 week until it was official. Until Lila was his daughter, not just in spirit but in law. Until no one could take her away. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything, for believing in this, for fighting for us. That's what friends do. Tom stood, stretching his back. Now I'm going home to sleep for about 12 hours. Sarah's probably already got the bed warmed up for me. You should do the same. Today's been a long day, and it's only 9 in the morning. After Tom left, Cole went upstairs and checked on Lila. She was still asleep, curled up with the wooden horse and a stuffed bear Rosa had brought her. She looked peaceful, safe, young in a way she hadn't when she'd first arrived. The weight of survival had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the simple rest of a child who knew she was protected. Cole pulled the door, mostly closed, and went to Catherine and Michael's graves for the first time since Lila had arrived. The oak tree provided shade. The view stretched across the ranch to the distant hills. It was a good place, peaceful. He'd chosen it because Catherine had loved this spot, had brought picnics here on summer afternoons. He sat on the grass between the headstones and told them everything, about Lila's arrival, about learning to open his heart again, about the fight and the resolution and the future that lay ahead. He told them about James's confession, about finally knowing the truth after 20 years of self-blame. I'm going to live again, he said to the stones. Really live, not just exist. I'm going to be a father again, to a girl who needs one, as much as I need to be one. I hope that's okay. I hope you understand. He traced Catherine's name carved in granite. I loved you, love you still, always will. But I think maybe there's room in a heart for more than one kind of love. Room for honoring the past while building a future. The wind rustled through the oak leaves, and Cole chose to hear it as approval. He stood, brushed grass from his jeans, and took one last look at the graves before heading back to the house. 3 months later, the ranch looked different. Not in structure, but in spirit. The iron gates stood open during daylight hours, welcoming rather than forbidding. The gardens Catherine had planted were being restored, with Lila and Rosa working side by side to bring them back to life. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for 2 decades. The adoption had been finalized on a Tuesday morning in late December. Judge Martinez, who'd known Catherine back in the day, had presided with tears in her eyes as she declared Lila Reyes legally and forever Lila Maddox. Rosa had brought tamales to celebrate. Tom had brought champagne that only the adults drank. Lila had worn a new dress and smiled so wide Cole thought his heart might burst. The silver-framed photograph on Cole's desk now stood upright, Catherine and Michael smiling out at the world. Next to it was a new photograph, Cole and Lila together on the porch, taken by Rosa the week after the adoption. They were both grinning, Cole's arm around Lila's shoulders, Lila holding the wooden horse. The caption Rosa had written on the back read, "A family reborn." James Thornton had pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and received consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Marcus Webb was serving 18 years for conspiracy and fraud. Their trials had been covered in the state papers, and for a few weeks, Cole had been famous again for all the wrong reasons. But the attention faded, as attention always does, and life returned to normal. A new normal, a better one. Redemption Springs had embraced Lila and Cole in ways the town hadn't embraced anything in years. People who'd avoided the Maddox Ranch for decades now stopped by to say hello, to bring casseroles, to ask if there was anything they could do. Cole had accepted the help awkwardly at first, unused to being part of a community again. But Lila thrived on it, making friends at school, joining the youth ranch program, becoming a fixture at Rosa's Sunday dinners. The ranch itself was thriving. Cole had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men from town who needed jobs and were willing to learn. He taught them the way his father had taught him, with patience and high standards. The cattle herd was growing. The gold remained secret, Cole's insurance policy against whatever future might bring. On a cold January morning, Cole stood at the barn watching Lila work with Dante. She'd become an excellent rider, natural in the saddle, with that innate sense of how to communicate with horses. She was teaching Dante a new trick, patient and encouraging, rewarding the smallest progress with treats and praise. "She's got a gift," Rosa said, coming to stand beside him. Catherine would have loved her. She would have, Cole agreed. She'd have loved everything about her. The stubbornness, the heart, the way she refuses to give up. "Like someone else I know." Rosa smiled. "You did good, Cole. Letting her in, letting yourself live again. Catherine would be proud." "I hope so." He watched Lila laugh, as Dante finally executed the turn she'd been working on. "I wake up some mornings and can't believe this is real. That she's here. That I get to be her father. Believe it, you earned this. Both of you earned each other." That evening, Cole sat with Lila on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments at day's end, sharing the silence and occasionally the day's stories. "School's doing a father-daughter dance next month," Lila said casually, "for Valentine's Day." Cole felt a flutter of panic. He hadn't danced since Catherine. Wasn't sure he remembered how, but Lila was looking at him with hope in her eyes, and there was only one possible answer. "I'd be honored to take you," he said. "Really? Because I know dancing probably isn't your thing. We don't have to. If, really, we'll go. I'll embarrass you with my terrible dancing, and you'll pretend not to know me, and it'll be perfect." She laughed and leaned against his shoulder. "You won't embarrass me, and even if you did, I wouldn't care." They sat in comfortable silence while the sun finished its descent. Cole thought about the girl who'd knocked on his gate 6 months ago, soaked and desperate. Thought about the man he'd been then, locked away from life, haunting his own existence. Thought about everything that had changed, everything that had been won and lost, and found again. "Cole," Lila's voice was soft. "Do you think they'd be happy? Your first family, About us. Cole looked up at the emerging stars, at the same sky Catherine and Michael had looked at, and knew the answer, with certainty. They'd be thrilled, he said. Catherine always said love multiplies, it doesn't divide, that there's always room in a heart for more people to love. She was right about that. Right about most things. I wish I could have met them. Me too. But in a way you carry them forward. The home they built, the love they shared, it doesn't disappear just because they're gone. It becomes part of the foundation for what comes next, for us. Lila nodded, processing this in the thoughtful way she had. Then she smiled and held up the wooden horse she'd brought outside with her. Thunder and I are going to finish homework. Math test tomorrow. Need help? Probably. Algebra's still kicking my butt. Mine too. Let's get kicked together. They went inside, leaving the porch swing swaying gently in the evening breeze. Through the window, the warm light of home spilled out into the Texas night. The Maddox ranch, once a monument to isolation and loss, was alive again with the sounds of living. And standing at that same window where he'd watched storms for 20 years, Cole Maddox smiled and thought about tomorrow, and all the tomorrows to come.